Antonio. Relief for him on his side of VR46 Racing as well yesterday. The number 49 was buzzing to get himself into Q2. He said, all year, one of my main issues on the GP25 has been when I've got a brand new soft rear tyre fitted, there's just too much grip. I mean, not very often you hear a rider talk about too much rear grip, but it overpowers the front. And he said, I always felt that was going to be exaggerated here in Misano, where it's so super grippy. He's needed a bit of a break on a Friday, hasn't he, Didier? He got it first time directly into Q2 since the German Grand Prix at the Sachsenring.
But this is the rider they're all trying to chase, Marquez, who saw his winning streak ended, although if there was one rider he wouldn't have minded it ended by, it's Alex Marquez, who took the 25 points and denied him that match point here this weekend with victory in Barcelona. But Alex Marquez was at the top of the queue of riders, saying that Mark would appear to have a step over the rest. It seemed pretty clear yesterday. Even though he was having some troubles through sector 3, Marc Marquez ultimately got to the bottom of those and ended the day a tenth and a half clear of the rest.
Yeah, and what was looking rather ominous for the opposition was in the early part of practice yesterday when he was focusing entirely on race pace. Mark did a 1:31.129 on 19-lap-old medium tyres. That was faster than 11 riders managed in time attack mode on fresh soft rubber. Mark himself was so in the zone, so confident with his pace that he only did one time attack, only fitted one soft rear tyre in that practice session yesterday. So quite clearly, I think Alex Marquez himself said at a step or maybe even two ahead of the field yesterday was Mark. And as Lewis just mentioned, we saw him having his issues in that sector 3, those fast rights, which have always been a bit of an Achilles heel for Mark throughout his career. Cavone, he said, was a bit of an issue. Didn't really matter, he was still third fastest, wasn't he, in that third sector yesterday. So all the signs are pointing towards Marc Marquez being the big favourite for yet another sprint and Grand Prix double.
Well, of course, the key session to come this morning, qualifying 2. I've seen Marc Marquez have his issues in recent times. Only one pole in the last 4 now for Marc Marquez, which counts as something of a drought by his very high standards. As we now take a look at Luca Marini, one of 2 factory Hondas automatically through to qualifying 2. But they were 6th and 7th, Mir and Marini, yesterday, as their progress continues to be reflected in their results.
Having just used that one soft tyre in practice yesterday, though, I do wonder whether Mark, 4.226 kilometres, quite short, quite tight, this Misano circuit, whether at the back of his mind he was already thinking of a possible 2-stop strategy in Q2 coming up later on this morning. Well, there's clear signs, crystal clear signs that Honda are moving in the right direction finally. After a real torrid last 3 or 4 years, HRC, well, certainly their engineers, led by Romano Alberciano, of course, now former Aprilia tech guru. We saw some additional aero updates yesterday, the Stegosaurus additions to the rear seat unit. And the Hondas are coming, no question. Joan Mir, despite what was a very painful get-off late on in practice at turn 9, left him with a bit of a sore neck. He was going to be having a lot of physio last night and this morning, was 6th fastest, 1 place ahead of Marini, who just looks so confident right now on that RC213V, does Luca. Best Friday of the season so far for the home hero. Straight into Q2 now in the last 3 Grand Prix. Promising signs, very much so, for HRC.
6th, 7th and 11th, with Johan Zarco just outside the top 10 yesterday, as Zarco did get his hands on some performance upgrades in the afternoon, which he said he liked the feel and the look of, which certainly was reflected after he was way down the back of the order in free practice 1 yesterday morning. That jumped up to 11 in the afternoon. Zarco will be one to watch in qualifying 1. Claudio Domenicali of the Ducati top brass is here, CEO, of course, of Ducati. Of course, this is such a special circuit for them. Well, Ducati Week is held here during the summer break. This is very much the most home of home Grand Prix for Ducati Corsa. We're about an hour away from their home in Borgo Panigale.
Yeah, of course, it was right here last year where Enea Bastianini gave them their 100th Premier Class victory, and one of several very memorable days in Ducati's recent history. Last time out, of course, they won their 6th successive Constructor Prize. Let's go down and say a very good morning in the San Marino sunshine to Jack. Good morning, buddy.
Yeah, good morning, guys. Good morning to everybody at home. I just wanted to talk about the Yamaha V4 that, of course, made its debut yesterday, grabbed headlines headlines as a result, but I thought it was very interesting from speaking to Augusto Fernandez yesterday. That was the very first time that he'd had the opportunity to put a brand new soft rear tyre in the rear and really go at it in time attack modes, and he admitted that lap time really surpassed my expectations and everybody else's expectations in the box as well. I think once you take into consideration the fact that on the top speed charts it is dead last, which gives you an indication that because it's just in its infancy, they've probably got that V4 engine dialed up to what, 85-90% of what it's going to be capable of. Alex Rins said, looking at the data as well, Augusto being a test rider was maybe just ever so slightly tentative through Cavone. Turn 11 was losing 0.3 of a second to both himself and Fabio Quartararo. So you add all of these factors together and he's still just 0.6 of a second slower than what Fabio was able to do. Yamaha have done magnificently, because that V4 powered M1 is a real beast, and I don't think that it's out of the question that Fabio Quartararo jumping on that bike would instantly be probably a second quicker than what Augusto is doing, and that's without sort of taking anything away from the performance of Augusto Fernandez, but we just know how good Fabio is, so Yamaha can be really, really confident that they've got something that's going to take them to that next level in 2026. I think there's reason to get excited for everyone associated with Yamaha, because from that one early sign yesterday, there is so many positives to take from it.
Yeah, indeed, Jack, absolutely. Very eye-catching first outing, wasn't it? Certainly in front of the public. Their first debut for Augusto Fernandez and that new V4 Yamaha, 19th fastest with a 1:31.678. Fernandez spoke to the media last night and said the clear improvement, he said, compared to the traditional inline four-cylinder that Yamaha have run throughout the MotoGP history is rear grip, which we know something Yamaha engineers have been searching for, it seems, forever. There's quite a nice line actually from Fernandez, because there has been so much attention, there's been so much focus on the development behind the scenes of this V4, and when it already debuted, Fernandez said he never used to get so much media attention when he was winning the Moto2 World Championship. He's been besieged by the media, hanging on his every word about the performance of this V4. And of course, it was some of the good news, as we mentioned yesterday. Fernandez has been retained by Yamaha as a test rider for 26 and 2027, which will feature a bunch of R cards. And if, unfortunately, we hope that doesn't happen, but if any of Yamaha's quartet of riders finds himself injured at some point, well, their designated super sub will be Fernandez.
Yeah, it wasn't lost on him, was it? The history he was making yesterday, not just for Yamaha, but in MotoGP in many respects. Yesterday morning, so much attention, as he and you said yesterday, on what he was up to, and despite that little glitch in the morning, it was generally an overall positive day for Augusto Fernandez. And of course, in previous years, Yamaha, they've been trying to make progress with the inline four. They've been trying to bring more power to that motorcycle, because they've been out going down the straights, but that's always cost them the famed front handling and front end that Yamaha's got. So the V4 potentially going to end that, although the V4 is now on the floor for the second time this weekend. That is Augusto Fernandez down, as he was yesterday afternoon.
Yeah, it's turn 2, second time. That's an almost identical crash. If you overlay the videos from yesterday's practice session to that tip-off at turn 2, they're pretty much identical as far as Fernandez goes. So just having his issues negotiating that first sector, and in particular that tight left-hander as you start the lap here. Fernandez had already put in a 1:32.6. Yeah, clearly the early signs are incredibly positive, aren't they? As far as Yamaha are concerned, they're only going to get better and better, faster and faster, and with more data and information. They have repeatedly told everybody that's listening in the paddock, and that is the entire paddock, that this is just a data gathering exercise this weekend. They're not looking at position, they're not bothered about results at all. I imagine feeling rather sore this morning is Joan Mir after his heavy crash at the turn 9 yesterday. We've had no time set at the moment as far as the Spaniard is concerned. He looks a bit ashen-faced there, doesn't he, as well? This is him trail braking for so long. You are there into turn 9. Looked like a rather innocuous slide, this bottom, didn't it, into the gravel trap, but a little tap on his wrist, a bit of a sore neck as well from Joan Mir. So let's hope that that's not going to keep him out of action at any point here this weekend. Well, of course, there's been so much talk about the new Yamaha V4. of course, in the present, in the current, and we've still got business to attend to on track this weekend. Jack Miller 16th yesterday, Mikel Oliveira 22nd. Certainly not an easy start to the weekend for the Portuguese ride. Let's get the thoughts of their boss, Gino Borsoy, with Jack.
Yeah, and just firstly, a little birdie tells me that this is Gino's 500th Grand Prix in the paddock from either racing or team boss at Aspar, now at Prima Pramac. Is that true? Is it 500 this weekend?
Yes, that's true. Seems that I'm quite old. Yes, it is a long journey, nice and good journey for me. Of course, I enjoy a lot every time when I'm on track. I'm still like a fresh and young mind as at the beginning of my career. So it's a special weekend for me. 500 races, no miss one day in 29 years. So means that also on the other side I'm quite lucky because no injury, no problem. Injury when I was riding for sure, but another big issue. So means that I'm really happy, and for that reason I have to be happy.
Congratulations on achieving 500. Yesterday, obviously, so many people were fascinated to see how Augusto and the new V4 got on. It surprised me. I spoke to Augusto. It said that it surprised him. How happy were you to see the obvious performance levels straight away from that package?
For sure, we are all happy because the performance of the bike yesterday was really good. Much better than what we expected, honestly speaking. The difference between the actual bike to the new one is not huge. For sure, we know we have to work a lot on the bike. We have a lot of work to do in front of us. But anyway, as a first step, after first race, we start straight away in a really good, with a really good performance. So at the moment, we are happy, and let's see what we can do for the last 2 months before the end of the season. They are in program a lot of tests, and but the idea is quite clear. On the on the engine, we need to improve a lot. But as a chassis and feeling with the bike, it's already a big step forward from the old bike.
I know that publicly Yamaha are saying, we haven't made a decision yet whether we're going to run it in 2026, but I mean, from that yesterday, it's obvious, right? They have to go with that next year.
Well, I mean, it's not my task. They have to reply on this answer. They have in program to prepare everything ready for next year. Let's see if they are ready, but everybody will have the new bike for next year.
In terms of just finally looking at your squad for next year, you've obviously got 2 riders in Jack Miller and Toprak Pascalioglu. Have you now got 2 crew chiefs confirmed as well? There was some talk coming into this weekend that Yamaha have managed to sign Alberto Giribiola to become Toprak's crew chief next year. Is that true?
Well, it's something that we are still studying. We are working on it, and I think between here and the next day we will know something more.
Thank you very much, Gino. We'll wait for further news.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much then, Jack. Thanks to Gino Borsoy, and many congratulations. 500 Grand Prix. That is some record. I can't be too far myself, to be honest. I need to rack up the old appearances to see where we're at. Well, unfortunately, as we feared, it is bad news. For today's action, but having spoken to team management at HRT, he has decided to withdraw from the whole of today's action. No qualifying and no sprint then, as far as me is concerned. Hoping to be back fit for tomorrow's 27-lap Grand Prix, Lewis.
Yeah, significant discomfort and limited mobility in his neck is the official line from Honda. They've elected to miss today's running to focus on Sunday, so we will not be seeing Joan Mir in qualifying nor in the Tissot sprint later on today. Well, we haven't been seeing much of Brad Binder on the racetrack either this morning. Yesterday, he had problems with his chain breaking free, which is why he didn't get a time attack in at the end of practice, and it would appear as if the same problem, look, you can see just on the rear tyre there for Brad Binder, that was yesterday. Similar problems this morning, and you could see Binder when the problems flew up this morning that he was absolutely livid. The lightning, unfortunately, has struck twice for the South African.
No chain, no gain for Brad Binder then. Yeah, what a nightmare, costing him some vital lap times here. So no Mir for the remainder of Sprint Saturday. which is a real hammer blow as far as he's concerned, because if he is fit to start tomorrow's 27-lap Grand Prix, of course, it will be from the back of the grid.
Well, P12, of course, because he is into Q2.
Yeah, he did get through into Q2. But there is Binder. That chain proving a real pain for him right now. Bezzecchi is that leads this session. 131.013. Bez looks mint this weekend. He looks really strong. Of course, he knows every millimetre of this Misano World Circuit Marco Simoncelli track. He's here all the time on production bikes for the VR46 Academy. But this is impressive. This is looking very, very strong. He's only 2/10 clear of the Marquez brothers at the moment. Mark, the only rider within 2/10 of Bez so far this morning, as yet another chain inspection that is underway down at KTM.
It's a problem that you very rarely see, let alone twice in 2 sessions. So something fundamentally not quite right there in the KTM camp. It wasn't the greatest day overall, was it, for the KTMs collectively yesterday? They do have one rider into Q2, Pedro Costa in 9th place, but the quartet of RC16 riders all complaining of a lack of stability on board their bikes yesterday.
Yeah, Acosta, he was certainly one of them. Said too much pumping from the rear tyre. That makes it hard to be consistent with the bike moving around so much. Like at times you're riding on a cobbled street. Bastianini, as we mentioned, he really was suffering yesterday with that sort of nervous feeling on the KTM, particularly going through Cavone. When you're going through a 6-gear corner with a lack of stability, well, that's a pretty perilous situation to find yourself, isn't it, for the Beast? He was only 20th fastest in Sector 3 yesterday, wasn't he? He was losing 4/10 in Split 3 to Mark alone. So quite clear where he's going to be chasing time this morning. And he just said that the rear around this grippy Misano circuit, a lot of grip on offer here at Misano, but the rear was just pushing the front too much, and that was adding to several sins for the Beast here yesterday.
Rather animated once again. Fabio Quartararo there in the Yamaha box. Perhaps he's the biggest surprise out of the top 10. We've seen plenty of Yamaha success here over the years, and Quartararo's won a world championship here back in 2021. But his big problem, well, amongst many, was that he wasn't really getting much of a step out of a soft tyre. So he felt no real difference between the soft or the medium rear tyre yesterday.
Let's go back down to pit lane then. One of the best to ever throw his leg over a Grand Prix motorcycle, was he? Double MotoGP world champion and now new Hall of Famer. It's always a pleasure to get the thoughts of Casey Stoner, who joins Jack.
Yeah, he does indeed. Obviously, we had Kevin in the box yesterday. Casey also a part of that brilliant event on Thursday night. Firstly, congratulations on becoming a part of the Hall of Fame, to be amongst the biggest names that this sport has ever seen. How much pride did that fill you to be a part of that event and that elite club on Thursday?
Yeah, well, to be up and alongside people that, you know, you spent most of your career watching and growing up sort of idolising, and never ever would I consider myself alongside those gentlemen, and so it's an amazing, you know, opportunity that we get to be, you know, our names up and alongside them, but you know, very, very thankful for everything.
We saw yesterday you were spending a lot of time in the Honda box with Luca in particular. Was that Alberto's idea? How did that all come together for you to spend some time? And Luca was very thankful yesterday, saying that you offered some tips in the morning, looking out on track, and then working closely with the team in the afternoon.
Yeah, no, I've got no obligations anywhere up and down this paddock, so it's pretty much me walking up and down pit lane, and I watch some things out on track, and when I do see things, and you know, I can just give a little bit of advice here and there, but honestly, you know, they're the ones doing the job, so it's you know, that was nothing to do with me yesterday. That was them, you know, sort of doing what they needed to do. I've got a lot of time for everyone there at the Honda garage. I had some fantastic years there, and still have what I consider family in and around that side of things. So I appreciated everything Honda did for me and gave me, and so I was just in there visiting them and letting them know what I saw on track.
And the progress that Honda, certainly post the summer break, have been making has been extraordinary. We knew that they weren't going to be languishing at the bottom of the championship for a while, and certainly with the parts they've been bringing and the amount of parts over recent weeks as well, it clearly proves that they're on a upward trajectory.
Yeah, it's been tough for the Japanese manufacturers. You know, we saw many years ago when the rule changes were supposed to be put in, I believe that they, Honda and even Yamaha had already developed the bike to be without aerodynamics and all this kind of thing. And then all of a sudden the rules just sort of seem to crumble and disappear and, turn up in the next year and everybody's still got winglets. So I think they just got left behind at that point. They weren't developing it. They weren't continuing in that direction, and they're just sort of clawing themselves back now, I suppose. I don't know how much they wanted to invest, I suppose, in getting themselves back further up the grid, because it is a big investment, especially with aerodynamics. It's where the major cost sort of comes from. And I think they were sort of cautious on how much they really wanted to, invest with their time and budget in that. So all of them seem to be coming back a little bit to a certain degree. You know, Yamaha's still struggling, but Honda have certainly made some waves in the last several races and seem to be pushing themselves further up the grid.
Just finally, this morning we saw you alongside Christian Gambarini, obviously someone you know incredibly well, and Pecco. We spoke to in Austria. Since then, Pecco has had a couple of very difficult weekends, but at least yesterday there were sort of green shoots of recovery. It was good to see him smiling and with a little bit of confidence back. How nice was that for you to see him at last, after some tough weekends, looking a bit more like the Bagnaia we know and love?
Yeah, well, it all... We can look at that after one day or one session and think what we want, but it's something that needs to continue. It doesn't just happen overnight. You certainly need to try and get some confidence back. He's struggling in some areas there, and it was hard to see on track, to be honest, what he was struggling with on the personal side. Everything looked a little bit okay. He just wasn't getting the most out of the bike. And then he did a little bit more in the afternoon and seemed to get a little bit more out of it. But I just spoke to Christian about what I saw yesterday and some of the complaints that Pecco's been having. I actually did witness yesterday on track, which I didn't witness any of the other Ducati riders. And so it was a little bit unique. I personally thought that Pecco sort of needed to get on with it a little bit more, but I did see yesterday some things with that bike that just didn't seem quite right compared to the others that all looked very comfortable. So we'll see what happens this weekend. They seem confident today to make a few changes and improve a little bit of that situation, but we'll see where it progresses.
Casey, thanks for your time as ever, and again, congratulations on becoming a MotoGP Hall of Famer.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jack. Always an absolute pleasure to listen to the thoughts and the insight and the analysis of two-time MotoGP world champion Casey Stoner. We were just there inside the garage that he so brilliantly occupied for a few years, the factory Honda garage, with sadly no Joan Mir, an unused helmet on his side of the box after he tipped off. Pretty hard it was, that crash at turn 9 yesterday. He said he was going to have a pretty extensive physio last night and this morning. Clearly he's not rectified some rather nasty pain and lack of mobility in that neck. It was the San Marino Grand Prix here last year that Mir was also missing from after he was laid low with a real nasty bout of gastroenteritis. So my tip for Joan Mir is maybe sort of try and avoid any kind of issues at the San Marino Grand Prix, because not been a particularly lucky hot spot for him, has it?
Don't walk under any ladders on your way to Rimini, because clearly he's had some misfortune over the years here, and Honda will dearly want Mir not only to be fit for the weekend, because of course he's been very competitive so far this weekend, but also there's a test coming up on Monday, which they will of course want Joan Mir to take a full part in. And of course, I guess the thoughts are, with the big points up for grabs tomorrow, and a guarantee that whatever happens, Mir will start 12th on the grid for tomorrow's San Marino Grand Prix. That let's rest up, let's focus on the main event tomorrow rather than risk further damage in qualifying in the sprint. Of course, qualifying in recent times for Mir, they haven't seen him any higher than 10th on the grid in the last 3. He was 5th on the grid in Brno in a weekend where, of course, we had some mixed conditions on the Friday. So we will see him back out on track tomorrow.
Hey, Charles RC minus Mir, though, are having a real strong start to the sprint Saturday, because Marini, once again, right up there in second place, 131.194. Bez from Marini. We're on board now with Acosta, who's just slotted his KTM up into third place without any question. Then he's just been chasing some stability with that RC16. Just behind Acosta, we've lost somebody. The 37 was having no drama. It's Jorge Martin, the reigning world champion, then has tipped off the factory of Aprilia in the first sector. Here he is, hard braking into turn one. A little bit bumpy on entry. It looks like it was the bumps that just caught him out. When I say bumpy, it's more ripples, really, because this is a very, very grippy and very sort of smooth Lozano surface. Thankfully, Martin able to walk away relatively unscathed. It's a pretty fast old tip-off through there. 170 kilometres an hour when you flick it right in that braking zone. So, yeah, that's going to grab his attention on this Saturday morning. Martin down on the floor.
There's no good time to crash, but with 5 minutes of free practice 2 to go, that's not a particularly good one either, because, of course, they've now got a job to, first of all, get that bike back. Not a long way to get it back, because he's down at turn 1 to get him into the pit lane, but then essentially a hasty repair job down at the factory Aprilia team to ensure that Jorge Martin has 2 bikes available for him in qualifying 2, which is coming up in about half an hour.
Has he already undone some of the great work he produced yesterday afternoon? Quite an impressive little stint this morning from Acosta. He thought about tipping into turn 1 and then thought better of it. That's Marco Bezzecchi then, now the lone factory Aprilia rider out on circuit. Said it looks like if anybody can offer any resistance to Mark here this weekend, it looks like it will come in the shape of the 72. He's bang on form here, recovering brilliantly from what was a bang average weekend as far as Bez's standards have been concerned of late in Barcelona last weekend. A double DNF, a real blot on his recent copybook. He did just sort of halt his charge towards Bagnaia in third place overall in the World Championship. The gap between the two Italians now in that battle for third overall sits at 40 points coming into this 16th round.
Looking at the way the season is progressing, Bagnaia is going to have to really up his game in the 7 races that remain to avoid losing that third place in the World Championship. It's not just Bezzecchi that might be chasing him down. Pedro Acosta's only 14 points behind Bez. And then you've got Morbidelli and Gian Antonio level on points, a 22 point further back from Acosta. So Pecco Bagnaia, if he does want to take his place at the MotoGP Awards on the Sunday after Valencia and ensure he finishes in the top 3 in the World Championship for what would be a 5th consecutive season, he certainly does need to up his game in the rounds that remain. Although so far this weekend it does appear as if Bagnaia is not back to his old best, but certainly much closer to it.
Fastest on Friday morning was Frankie Morbidelli, and at the moment fastest on Saturday morning here in his own Grand Prix. Jorge Martin's going to get some fresh leathers on for his upcoming appearance in Q2. As he rebounds from this pretty nasty front end washout going into the first corner. Trail braking into turn 1, and that front tyre just crying no more. Thankfully for Jorge's sake, it's a rather harmless if high speed slide into the gravel trap. I'm sure this hearts in mouths of everybody at Aprilia when they see Jorge Martin parting company with that RSGP. Morbidelli then the first rider this morning that's into the 130s. More yellow flags then out now in sector 3. Miller's buried a Yamaha deep into the air fence. Let's hope that that's not punctured, because if it is, we might get a red flag here.
Yeah, well, this is sector 3, so this will be a fast crash, and yeah, it's been easier to spot which Yamahas haven't been down the road so far this weekend. We're looking at him in the back of the picture. He's ran on and he's just had to bail off that bike before he ends up in the fence with it. In fact, he doesn't. He ends up following that bike into the fence. I think the air fence has just about survived that from the session's point of view, so we will get the final 2 minutes uninterrupted, and unfortunately also Jack Miller also completely undamaged.
Yeah, it's turning out to be a rather expensive weekend right now as far as Yamaha are concerned. Their nice new shiny V4 has been crashed twice by Augusto Fernandez. It was a very strange and weird FP1 yesterday for Miguel Oliveira. We know Miguel's not a frequent crasher. He was on the floor twice in FP1 at turn 3 and turn 16. He was bewildered, really. Said in the morning session the bike was too nervous on the front and lacking confidence, and then in the afternoon all kinds of electronic gremlins came in the way of his Pramac Yamaha. So it was a very untidy Friday all round in both sessions as far as Oliveira was concerned. So that is now a 5th Yamaha crash of the weekend already. A 6th rather, because that's the second of Miller, isn't it, of course?
Love to know how many laps are on these tyres of Marco Bezzecchi, because he's now down to a 1:30.624. That is faster than he went yesterday afternoon in practice. So it's a new rear tyre, a new soft rear tyre. That front slick, medium front, has had 22 laps on it, so he'll be touching race distance by the time this session is over and done with. So certainly that soft rear tyre has accounted for some of the step forward that Bezzecchi has just made. But as mentioned, that's faster than he's been at any stage this weekend.
Touching race distance, it looks like he's going to be within touching distance a mark in both the sprint and the Grand Prix here tomorrow. It looks like on paper so far this weekend that the two standout riders are the 93 and 72. Here is Bez then now, top end of the circuit, crucial now. You pick up some real good dry grip to set yourself up for this slingshot towards the 6-gear Cavone. On the curbs he goes and then flicks it right. A bit nervous, a bit twitchy that probably, wasn't it? Going through 11. Now he's going back through the gearbox, as you can see there. Sort of constantly decreasing speed now as these right-handers progress all the way down from the 6-gear turn 11 to the 1st gear turn 14, where you've scrubbed off nearly 300 kilometres an hour to 70 kilometres an hour in just a couple of corners.
Riding on board we were with Fabio Quartararo. He's 7th at the moment. All 5 manufacturers inside the top 7. And this is Quartararo. Is he going to show us? It's not turn 1 he's coming towards 2. It's much quicker than that. Turn 11, Cavone, the fearsome near 300 kilometre an hour approach into one of the fastest corners in Grand Prix racing.
How hard's he pushing? Well, that's how hard he's pushing. Just look how unsettled that Yamaha was on the curbs on the outside. He's raging. Quartararo can't get into the 130s. 4th theory meet, steady on.
Give me that V4, he's saying.
He needs a cool towel on the head, I think, at the moment, does Quartararo. He said yesterday the bike just was not performing consistently on either the soft or the medium rear. As a consequence, you've got no confidence to push. He said the lack of feeling with the soft on the left side, a lack of feeling on the right side with the medium rear tyre, all combined, that just makes you struggle. And how many times have we've already seen 6 Yamaha crashes so far this weekend? And I think on a high grip surface like Misano, we were expecting the Yamahas to sort of be figuring fairly prominently towards the top of the timesheets. Of course, they still could do. But on current evidence, yeah, it's been hard going. It's been a bit of a slog so far for the Iwata factory.
We'll be seeing all 5 of them in qualifying 1 very shortly. Quartararo, Rins, Oliveira, Miller and Augusto Fernandez. Frankie Morbidelli there, ending the session in 2nd place, just ahead of Luca Marini. That's the good news from a Honda point of view. The bad news is we won't be seeing Joan Mir anymore today. Let's get away from Alberto Puig with Jack.
Yeah, absolutely. Great of Alberto to join us. Bring us up to speed with Joan's condition. How is he this morning, and what's the decision-making process for him to sit out the remainder of today?
Well, you know, he had a big crash yesterday, and there's no...
This is the Pertamina Enduro VR46 Racing Team.
Peluang menjadi pemenang tak hanya ditentukan oleh kecepatan, melainkan aksi cepat untuk hasil yang akurat. Untuk mereka yang tangguh menuangkan harapan melalui performa terbaik yang diberikan. Demi menjadi kebanggaan Indonesia, Pertamina Enduro VR46 Racing Team.
Pertamina Enduro, Only Tango, Andala, Indonesia.
Energi bukan hanya untuk menang, tapi untuk terus mengejar passion, baik di lintasan maupun di luar. MX Performance menjadi bagian dari setiap langkah meraih mimpi. Menjaga performa itu penting, tapi menjaga passion itu segalanya.
MX Performance, Ferrari punya passion.
It's been a weapon for some time, hasn't it, to be fair, Luca Marini? Great stuff, Jack. Thanks very much for grabbing that latest info on Joan Mir. The VR46 Academy have had a very strong start to Sprint Saturday because they've locked out the top three. No great surprise given track knowledge coming to the fore. But Marco Bezzecchi leads Frankie Morbidelli, leads Luca Marini. So, yeah, a very positive Saturday so far for VR46. Some shot, just look at how low, just look how effective that whole shot device is on the factory Ducati of Marc Marquez. Marc ending that session in 5th place with a 1:31.206. Another 15 valuable race prep that's completed by Marc, but it's Bezzecchi that leads a trio of Italians here in Misano.
A soft rear tyre put in at the end did help, but Bezzecchi continuing his impressive weekend, topping from Frankie Morbidelli and Luca Marini. Pedro Acosta 4th for KTM, 4 different manufacturers in that top 4, with the Marquez brothers next. Rather livid Fabio Quartararo, let's put it that way, 7th. Ahead of Pecco Bagnaia, Fabio Di Giannantonio, who was set to spend a lot of this morning working on time attacks, 9th in the end for him. Ahead of Aldeguer, Bastianini, Ralph Fernandez, Martini, we saw crash at turn 1. Agura, Binder, who had more chain problems. Miller, who went down at turn 12. Vinales, Rins, Oliveira, Zarco. Augusto Fernandez, who had his second turn 2 crash of the weekend. And Sonkiat Chantra, 22nd.
So far, so good on Sprint Saturday as far as Marco Bezzecchi is concerned. Can he set himself up for a dream pole here in front of his home crowd in Misano? Qualifying up next in MotoGP.
This is VXL.
This is the Pertamina Enduro VR46 Racing Team.
Peluang menjadi pemenang tak hanya ditentukan oleh kecepatan, melainkan aksi tepat untuk hasil yang akurat. Untuk mereka yang tangguh menuangkan harapan melalui performa terbaik yang diberikan. Demi menjadi kebanggaan Indonesia, Pertamina Enduro VR46 Racing Team.
Pertamina Enduro, Only Tango, Andala, Indonesia.
Ducati there, based in nearby Bologna, about 120 kilometres away. Ferrari and Lamborghini call this part of Italy home as well. 15 minutes of Q1 coming up next, which will feature Zarco, Quartararo, Binder, Vinales, Ralph Fernandez, Miller, who just had a tumble on the Pramac Yamaha in FP2, Bastianini, never off the podium in 5 MotoGP starts here in his Premier Class career. Aldeguer, Augusto Fernandez on the new Yamaha V4, Rins, Agura, Oliveira and Chantra. They are your participants in the upcoming Q1. If you are two flying Frenchmen, though, are on this opening qualifier. Joan Zarco for Honda LCR was 11th, fastest yesterday. To be fair, he wasn't really super close to nudging himself inside that top 10. He was over a tenth and a half behind Fabio Di Giannantonio. Quartararo was 12th. Going to be interesting to see what Bastianini can do on the Red Bull KTM Tech 3 machine. I don't think any of us could have foreseen Enea having to be in this Q1 session, given his stellar record here. As we mentioned, the 27-year-old Italian, winner of the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix here last year on one of our 2 visits. He's been on the podium in his last 7 Grand Prix here, 5 in MotoGP, twice in Moto2. So it was something of a shock to see him 17th at the end of play yesterday, particularly coming fresh off the back of his brilliance in Barcelona when he took his first Grand Prix podium for Tech 3 KTM.
Yeah, we have seen him in qualifying 2 in the last 4 Grand Prix. Has the beast. Here he is, but that streak under some serious threat here this weekend. Yeah, the record that he's enjoyed, of course, all on board a Ducati around this Misano circuit, going well and truly out of the window here this weekend. Here is a KTM colleague of his, Brad Binder, who might well feel that had he not had some problems with his chain breaking free yesterday, that he might not have needed to be in this qualifying 1 session. Did not get his final time attack available to him, and by the sounds of it, he only has 1 bike available to him in this Q1 session after those issues earlier on this morning.
Which could be the same issue to contend with for Jorge Martin, the reigning world champion, who tipped off the factory Aprilia going into the first corner towards the back end of the earlier 30-minute FP2 session. So we're finding out whether Martin himself has just the 1 factory Aprilia at his disposal as he looks to capitalise on just his 2nd appearance in Q2 this season. Under beautiful, clear blue skies though here in a circuit which sits very close to the beaches of Rimini, Cattolica and Riccione. Still packed with a lot of end-of-season holidaymakers. Packed, of course, this weekend with tens of thousands of MotoGP fans who are getting their annual glimpse of the best riders in the world. 2 places then indeed, your top 2, as always, who will advance into our 2nd qualifying session and then still keep themselves in the hunt for our 16th pole position of 2025. We haven't had too many pole starters, have we, so far this year? Just the 5. Marc Marquez 8, Quartararo 4, and 1 apiece for Bagnaia, Bezzecchi and Alex Marquez.
Although what we have seen in the last 5 Grand Prix is a rider come from this session, qualifying 1, to qualify on the front row of the grid. Johann Zarco did it at the Sachsenring. Pecco went from Q1 to pole back at Brno. Bezzecchi went from Q1 to the front row of the grid in both Austria and Hungary. And last time out in Barcelona, of course, we saw Fabio Quartararo go from qualifying 1 all the way to 2nd place on the grid. It is described as something of a jungle, this qualifying 1 session, but the rewards for getting out of this session could be quite significant.
You just saw there on screens Maverick Vinales. Not really the extra 15 minutes on track that he really requires at the moment, given the fact that he's well below his peak physical best. Putting up a good fight though, isn't he, as always, on the Red Bull KTM Tech 3 machine. To be fair to him, he was faster than his teammate Bastianini here yesterday. So here we go then, it's Fermin Aldeguer, the rookie on the 54 Gresini Racing Ducati. He's going to start the hot lap charge here this morning. Through turn 2 he goes. That's where Fernandez has already decked the new Yamaha V4 this weekend twice. Hard on the brakes in now into this tight right-hander. Turn 4. This is where Bastianini made his somewhat controversial move flat on the last lap to defeat Martin in the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix last year. Out of 6 now goes Aldeguer. Under the bridge he goes through turn 7, which is just more of a flat-out high-speed king. Hard then on the brakes once again into turn 8. Now this really is a good overtaking hotspot here in Misano. 2nd gear, just shy of 100 kilometres an hour. And then now you really do start to build up to the most spectacular part here of this Misano circuit, one of the most spectacular sections on the Grand Prix can. Let's listen to the beast.
So we'll follow the beast through turn 11, who's following Fermin Aldeguer. This is now into the right-hander of 12, and you're now gradually scrubbing off the speed through 13 before you really do have to brake hard and get yourself slowed down to around 65 kilometres an hour for turn 14. And Aldeguer's put a bit of distance between himself and Bastianini some way through this lap. You're going to need to be in the 130s here, surely, for a place in qualifying 2. 10th place yesterday was a 30.9, and we were doing mid-30s 30s with Betseki in free practice 2. Aldeguer's first lap of the session is a 31.1. Not a bad first effort, but he's going to need to go quicker than that.
Half a second quicker than what he managed at the end of play yesterday. So instantly he has found a big chunk of time on the soft rear tyre. That's more like it as far as Aldeguer is concerned. Binder then with just this one KTM at his disposal in this session with his repeated chain issues on the RC16. That's Nico Goyon, of course, boss of both Maverick Vinales and Enea Bastianini. I think at this point of the weekend, having found himself 17th on the timesheet yesterday, Enea would have been hoping for his lucky charm, new Tech 3 boss Gunther Steiner to be here once again, because of course Steiner completing his acquisition of Hervé Poncharad's Tech 3 team last weekend out in Barcelona. And while he was in attendance, and they are on his best weekend of the season so far. Now this is much more like it. This is the beast that we love to watch. Going about his business here in Misano, on course to set the best time of the session so far.
Both KTMs that we're following on screen going well. Maverick Vinales is also out there, but he was late out of the pit, so he's just on his first lap of the session at the moment. But look again, that was so often a trump card for Bastianini through that third sector, but he's lost a whole heap of time. 0.3 of a second. He's gone from a 10.5 behind Aldeguer to a 10.5 behind him.
Too twitchy, too nervous is what he said. The RC16 was doing underneath him in that third sector yesterday. Over the line he goes. It's P3 at the moment for the beast, a 131.364. Just behind him, Oliveira's climbed up briefly into fourth place because Binder, this is excellent work by Binder, because just at the back of his mind he will know that there's any mistake on this current bike and he's going to be in a whole world of trouble. A 131.015 though, great lap that by Binder. He's almost a 10.5 clear of Aldeguer in second.
Another rookie's threatening a place in the top two here. Here comes Ayagura. He misses out by about 700ths of a second of getting ahead of his fellow rookie Aldeguer. So Agura into third place, although that's some 4.5 tenths quicker than he went yesterday afternoon.
Quartararo and Vinales have both had strong first sectors. It's here where Vinales is really suffering with that lack of strength, lack of mobility, particularly on his left upper body. He's wide there going through 11. He just can't, he hasn't got the strength to muscle the KTM around the fast changes of direction at the moment. Such a shame, because Vinales, well, he was the standout rider for KTM in the opening half of the season. That injury in those wet conditions in Q2 in the Sachsenring is going to wreck the second half of the season. Zarco was well out wide, welding onto the green paintwork, coming through 11.
Vinales lost his first lap to track limits, and he's now lost the second, as you can see on screens for clipping the green there. Coming through Cavone, but we could be about to see the first 130 of this Q1 session from Fermin Aldeguer first. Quartararo likely to do the same. Here comes the 54 across the line to 130.852. That's much more like the kind of lap times we were expecting.
Yeah, he's almost a second quicker than anything he managed yesterday now, compared to yesterday as Aldeguer. Quartararo is always, so often as he does on Saturdays, rising to the occasion, once again leading the Yamaha assault. Quartararo finds a 130.8 as well. That's exactly 100th of a second clear of Aldeguer. So Quartararo, first time all weekend we've seen him in the 130s.
Comes Raul Fernandez, who has come through qualifying 1 on 4 previous occasions this season. He won't be making it 5 at the moment. He goes into 4th, so 4th and 5th for the Trackhouse Aprilias. Of course, both factory Aprilias already through. We've got Rins 6th, Bastianini only 7th from Oliveira, and Zarco, puzzlingly again, down the order, down in 9th place, which at the moment would leave him 19th on the grid.
Some effort that by Raul Fernandez, because he has to be beaten up, a bit battered and bruised, having had a real heavy crash yesterday at turn 15. Second gear going through that ultimate left-hander, but you're still carrying a fair old rate of knots when you flick it left. Quartararo then in the box seat. Him and Aldeguer strongest after that opening salvo here in Q1. This is a big run coming up, isn't it, for Bastianini? 17th he was yesterday, and at the moment potentially starting his home Grand Prix. He lives just down the road in nearby Rimini, so it's very much a home Grand Prix for the beast, but he's going to be starting the sprint and the Grand Prix in 17th spot the way it's going. Not what we anticipated, not what we expected at all from the number 23.
Did come from 16th or so on the grid to take a podium, of course. First time he raced here in MotoGP, but that was a very different MotoGP and a very different bike that Enea Bastianini was on. He's not showing signs really of getting much of a tune out of that KTM so far this afternoon. It's Fabio Quartararo. This time he's listening to some animated words rather than uttering a lot of them, as we saw in free practice 2. Of course, so fired up and so frustrated by the behaviour of his Yamaha in free practice 2 earlier on today. But you can always trust the 2021 world champion to pull out a fast qualifying lap.
Quartararo and Aldeguer have got a fair amount of breathing space in that top 2. We're just looking at Aldeguer getting himself set for his second time attack. Binder in third is over a tenth and a half behind the two directly ahead of him, which is a pretty decent advantage to be taking into the second run. No time set so far for Maverick Vinales, who's just suffering there. Another wince, another grimace from Vinales. Talk about bad timing. It's never a good time, is it, to pick up a serious shoulder injury, but it happened right at the time where KTM started to make big progress to get an understanding of what they needed to get competitive with the RT16. I was going to say somebody's gone down. Somebody has crashed out. It's Bastianini. Well, his weekend is going from bad to worse. At best, he's going to be 17th on the grid. Surely that's session over for him.
It's on his outlap. He was coming into turn 15, just knocked the temperature into those tyres. Didn't even get around to start his flying lap before he dropped it at turn 15. And Bastianini set to start way down the grid.
There has been no home comforts at all for Bastianini here this weekend. It has gone horribly, horribly wrong. On Thursday, when I spoke to him in the pre-event press conference, I mean, he was talking up the possibility of maybe even being in the mix for the victory here this weekend. Of course, buoyed by his brilliant display last Sunday in Barcelona, where he was the only rider that really early on into the mid-race point had anything for Mark and Alex. But at best, I mean, that's session over for the beast. At best, he's going to be 17th on the grid. Could get worse. Behind him at the moment are Oliveira, Zarco, Miller, Augusto Fernandez and Chantra. You certainly feel, looking at the lap times right now, that Oliveira and Zarco are certainly capable of leaping ahead of Enea.
Vinales, of course, also behind him, yet to set a time. He is still sat in the pits at the moment. Well, he still had his helmet on, so he's clearly planning to run again, but we haven't seen him out on the racetrack at the moment, so what a miserable weekend this is shaping out to be for Tech 3 KTM, as we now follow perhaps the one remaining KTM with a shot off Q2 in this session.
Yeah, Binder. Just look how hard he is in the front end of that KTM into the tight left-hander of 8, and then just trying to pick up the throttle into 9 we go. This is where Mir had his heavy crash yesterday on the factory Honda, which has ruled him out of today's action. Fair play to Binder. He's leaving it all out there right now. He's in South Africa. Will track him through the scary entry of Cavone. He's just about to complete sector 3 right now. Here's the 33. How's he faring in that third split with KTM boss Pit Byra looking on? I lost a whole chunk of time in the third sector, didn't he, Binder? So this certainly not a lap that's going to be giving Quartararo and Aldeguer any cause for concern.
Zarco's just set his best first sector so far, as has Raul Fernandez. Maverick Vinales has now joined the racetrack, so he'll get one more lap in at the end. This is not going to amount to much for Brad Binder. It's a 31.6, and all of that time, as you saw, was lost in the third sector. He's got 2 more cracks at this.
Yeah, having a right crack at it is Raul Fernandez on the Trackhouse Aprilia. He's looking really rapid. As you mentioned, a real cage-rattling crash for him yesterday at turn 15. Full commitment on the 25 Aprilia through Cavone. How's he got on in this third sector? Fernandez are now into the first gear, turn 14. This is brilliant by Fernandez. The Trackhouse rider at the moment on track for Q2, no question. Just one corner now left for him to negotiate. He'll flick it left, a little bit unstable, a little bit unsteady on the brakes into turn 16, but from fourth into third. Wow. Oh, lost all of his time in the fourth sector. Fernandez missing out by just over a tenth. So Quartararo and Aldeguer can breathe a sigh of relief.
Zarco only went 7th for 31.2 for him. He's got to find 4.5 tenths if he's going to make Q2. Ayagura needs to find around about 2 tenths. He's gone into 5th. 3rd and 5th for Trackhouse now.
So Zarco's improvement does make it worse for Bastianini. That has now pushed the Italian back into 18th place. As we feared it probably would do. A day to forget so far, a weekend to forget so far for Bastianini. What about Binder? We'll track him over the line now. 4th place, nothing going on this lap as far as the South African is concerned. It looks like there's going to be no Q2 spot for Binder. Just making sure he's going to be safely through. Here's Quartararo, we're on board with him now, powering out of turn 8. He was already leading this session with that early 1:30.842.
Don't rule out Ayagura from a shot at this yet. He's on a very good lap. He's pretty much matched Quartararo through the first 2 sectors. Zarco, as you can see, also on an improvement. And this is the sector where Quartararo has been gaining on everyone else. He certainly doesn't lack commitment through Cavone, turn 11. Millimetres to spare on the outside as he came dangerously close to the green.
Yeah, he was really flirting.
There's Zarco off.
With track limits. Zarco hasn't got a prayer of getting himself into Q2. Well, as it stands, he hasn't at the moment. Here's Agura then. The Moto2 world champion of 2024. So clean, so neat on top of that Aprilia, isn't he? That Agura. Oh, he sets the exact same lap time as his Trackhouse teammate Raul Fernandez, 1:30.977, as Oliveira jumps up into 3rd place. Quartararo then did improve his late speed. He jumps down to a 1:30.671. Quartararo, without any question, has got a place in Q2. Oliveira was really close. A great late effort by the Portuguese rider. A 1:30.944, missing out by just 900ths behind Aldeguer.
Look at Vinales, he's not giving up. Despite the pain and discomfort he's in, he is still having a right good go at this. He's got no time next to his name at the moment. The only valid lap he does in this session could have been the fastest one.
He's always been suffering though in sector 3. This is where he's had his big issues with that left shoulder problem. Bastianini, fair play to me, did get back out on circuit on the spare. Tech 3 KTM, yeah, once again, a whole chunk of time was lost by Vinales in the 3rd split. So this won't be good enough, unfortunately. Fabio Quartararo's best lap has been scrubbed off, so his 1:30.671 has gone. Thankfully for Quartararo's sake, that's not going to cost him a place into Q2. Vinales then does rescue 7th, some effort that, fair play, top job by the Top Gun. Looks like Quartararo absolutely flying here, Fabio Quartararo. This could be the best time of the weekend. Marc Marquez, fastest yesterday with a 1:30.480. Quartararo then on the factory Yamaha out of the final corner. Over the line he goes, 1:30.481. He misses out by a 1,000th of a second. That's a nice little settler for Q2 coming up, isn't it?
Quartararo cruising through. Look at his face. I think he took his brain out, to use the MotoGP analogy there, to get that lap on the board. I don't even think he knows quite how he did. A 1:30.481. Clearly, rather riled up is the 2021 world champion. He absolutely walked it.
Well, at the end of his first run, he did a 1:30.8, then down to a 1:30.6, which he lost for track limits, and then down to a 1:30.4. So there were big steps forward in that session. Big leaps in terms of lap times gained by Quartararo. He's such a joy to watch, isn't he? Such a pleasure to watch when he's in full flow, when he's wrestling that Yamaha around any racetrack in the world, when he's getting everything out of his massive talent pool. Quartararo once again with another top job then here in Q1. Nearly 4/10 of a second clear of Aldeguer, who does squeeze through.
right at the front, and as mentioned, the last 5 Q1s have seen a rider go through and qualify in the front row. Quartararo by nearly 4/10 from Fermin Aldeguer. Miguel Oliveira so nearly into Q2 but misses out. Third for him ahead of the Trackhouse Aprilia's on identical times. Brad Binder and Maverick Vinales on their KTM 6th and 7th. Alex Rins and Johan Zarco next up. Bastianini paying a heavy price for his crash, 10th. Jack Miller only 11th after we saw him crash late in FP2. Augusto Fernandez on the V4 12th. And Somkhat Chantra bringing up the rear in 13th.
So Fabio Quartararo already on pole position in 4 Grand Prix so far this year, still firmly in the game. For yet another pole position in 2025 here at the Misano World Circuit, Marco Simoncelli. He has delivered something special once again on Sprint Saturdays, has the flying Frenchman. Quartararo and Aldeguer then go through into Q2, coming up next live here in the Red Bull Grand Prix of San Marino. Who's going to be on pole position number 16 in 2025? The spectacular helicopter shot of the Misano World Circuit, Marco Simoncelli. We're flying above one of the best venues on the Grand Prix calendar, who will be flying very, very shortly to pole position in the Red Bull Grand Prix of San Marino. We have already seen Fabio Quartararo and Fermin Aldeguer safely get themselves out of what was always going to be a tough Q1 session. The home fans at the moment are suffering a little bit here on Sprint Saturday morning after Enea Bastianini had a thoroughly miserable 15-minute session in Q1. A late crash at turn 15 left the beast only 10th fastest on the timesheets in the opening 15-minute session. That, of course, translates into a 20th place starting position on the grid for the 13-lap sprint this afternoon at 3 p.m. local time, and for the 27-lap main Grand Prix here tomorrow. That is a star-studded Q2, isn't it? Marc Marquez, Bezzecchi, who led the way in FP2 this morning. Morbidelli fastest in FP1 yesterday. A revitalised, we hope, Pecco Bagnaia. Barcelona winner Alex Marquez, Luca Marini, Jorge Martin, the world champion, Pedro Acosta, Fabio Di Gianantonio, Fabio Quartararo and Fermin Aldeguer in this battle. What we were hoping was going to be a 12-rider battle for pole position here this morning. Sadly, though, no Joan Mir. A pain in the neck, unfortunately, after his crash at turn 9 yesterday. After consulting with the medical team here in Misano and with HRC, Mir, with some mobility issues in that neck, has decided to withdraw from today's action. Fingers crossed we see Joan ready to fight for points in the 27-lap Grand Prix here tomorrow. Well, already so far this year, there has been 8 pole positions that have gone the way of Marc Marquez. He has taken 15 sprint podiums. He has not, as yet, on Saturday afternoons, finished lower. Fingers crossed we see Joan ready to fight for points in the 27-lap Grand Prix here tomorrow. Well, already so far this year, there has been 8 pole positions that have gone the way of Marc Marquez. He has taken 15 sprint podiums. He has not, as yet, on Saturday afternoons, finished lower than second, has he? And he's on this amazing run of 8 successive sprint victories. Super Saturdays have been Mark's domain, haven't they, for so much of 2025. He looked fantastic yesterday, led the way with a 1:30.480. There are lots of Italians, though, hungry for home success here this weekend, led by Marco Bezzecchi, who've had his best Friday on the factory Aprilia here yesterday, second fastest at the end of play. He has led this morning's FP2, also looking sharp, Morbidelli and Marini. So I don't think Mark's going to have this all his own way, Lewis.
No, he's certainly going to have to nail the perfect lap in this qualifying session. His race pace looks exceptionally strong, but he's got to get qualifying right. And as much as he may have had 8 pole positions this season, only one of those has come in the last 4 Grand Prix. Of course, crashed in qualifying 2 in Brno. Could only manage 4th on the grid in Austria, and then was beaten by both Alex Marquez and this man in qualifying a week ago. And we probably have to factor this man into the equation too, Fabio Quartararo, after the lap time he just set in qualifying 1, just 1,000th of a second slower than Marc Marquez's fastest lap time of the weekend. And if Marc Marquez isn't the king of qualifying, then that honour might well go to Fabio Quartararo.
Well, last year we got ever so close to our first ever 1:29 lap here in Misano. Pecco Bagnaia 1:30.031. Are we going to see a 1:29 in this upcoming Q2 session? There was late drama for the reigning world champion Martin in that 30-minute FP2 which kicked off our MotoGP action here this morning. Martin taking a fall at the first corner. Yeah, he was okay. We're going to find out shortly, I'm sure, whether he's got both of his factory Aprilias available. There are your most recent pole sitters. Pecco Bagnaia did the double on our 2 visits to Misano here last year. Looking like there was light at the end of what's been a dark tunnel of late for the double world champion. Bagnaia was 4th fastest yesterday, only 300ths of a second away from the top 3. Can Bagnaia find himself on pole position for just his 2nd time in 2025?
Well, he knows whatever happens, he's going to be qualifying better than he has in the last couple of Grand Prix. 15th in qualifying in Hungary, 21st he qualified a week ago for the Catalan Grand Prix. So whatever happens, Pecco Bagnaia won't be as deep on the grid as that, but he'll be eyeing minimum front 2 rows of the grid here, if not the front rows. We ride on board with Alex Marquez, who ended a long drought for a pole position since the beginning of 2023, last weekend in Barcelona. It feels like he might want to be one of the outside bets this time, though.
So under the scorching hot sunshine here in San Marino, it's Q2 time in MotoGP. Marc Marquez, a massive 182 points clear in the title chase. Martin needs just 3 points here this weekend in Misano, which should be easy pickings given his unbelievable record so far this year, to set himself up for match point number 1 over in Motegi in a couple of weeks' time. Has to leave this Grand Prix here in Misano 148 points or more clear of Alex, and he can be celebrating next time out. We start our 4-race flyaway tour of Japan, Indonesia, Australia and Malaysia.
Interesting little sideshow going on here on the outlaps. Quartararo's leading this queue of riders. Marc Marquez is next behind him. Then Alex, who's right behind Marc. And Jorge Martin looked like he was trying to follow the Marquez brothers, and Pedro Acosta's just punched himself right in the middle of them. So he's now right behind the Marquez brothers. A fast 5 that are now out on track. Quartararo is set to lead them onto their first flying lap.
Might be worth noting that in practice yesterday, Marc Marquez did only use 1 soft rear tyre to deliver his 1:30.480. So potentially he's got the rubber available if he does fancy a 2-stop strategy here for number 93, as now he builds up speed then on the factory Ducati, going in search of what will be his 75th MotoGP pole position. He's already topped over the century mark, haven't he, of career poles with 102. So watches just one rider need. Through turn 6, we go then. On board with Marc, and now you really do start to build up some momentum down this sweep through turn 7. About 300 kilometres now, you are just under that Red Bull branded bridge. on the brakes are now into 8, where we've seen Mark Hamitt moves as Mark made down the ears on the brakes into that left-hander of 8.
He's got a good start going to this lap, a 25.4 through the first sector. That's faster than his best first sector that he did in practice yesterday, when of course he ended up fastest overall. He's ahead of Alex Marquez too through the second sector, around about a couple of tenths between them. We haven't got a check on Quartararo at the moment, who certainly started the lap up the road, as we now follow Marc Marquez through a sector where he was struggling for much of the day yesterday, but certainly got the hang of it by the time he completed after the practice.
Coming to the part of the circuit where Alex said yesterday he was just on another level. Guess what? 2 left-handers. Here through 15 he goes, now through 16. The other Ducati riders can see the data. They can see in just these 2 corners alone, it's where Mark is gaining so much time compared to everybody else. And his opening time in this session, straight away into the mid-130s, a 130.624 ahead of Alex and Bez. Alex also himself into the 130s, just 200s between the 2 brothers at the top.
Quartararo did bail out of that first lap. He was, of course, leading that trade, so he's 9th at the moment, but not a representative lap time. Mir, of course, won't come out of the pits. Fermin Aldeguer also yet to emerge for his first run. Of course, he'll also be short of tyres after coming through Q1.
Well, we're looking at Mark and Alex once again, 93 versus 73. They tip their way through the left-hander of turn 8. Both on course to improve on their pair of 136s, which kicked off their Q2 session here in Misano. This is going to be some shot, isn't it? We stay with the helicopter now. You're going to get an indication of just how fast and how scary it is at tipping there. Just shy of 300 kilometres an hour when they flick it right into Cavone. Through 12 now, then we continue just to scrub off speed through 13, then back to the first gear, turn 14. Poor Mark is really pushing in. Hot laps coming in from Acosta and Vesecki. Mark's rolled out of it.
Yeah, and Alex is going to beat him comfortably on this lap. We might be very close to the 129s here if Alex Marquez can continue to build up in this final sector. Mark got a bit of wheelie coming out of Tremonto, so I don't know whether that was why he lost a little bit of time. Alex Marquez, a 130.222, the fastest lap time of this weekend so far.
Bagnaia briefly was on the front row. Bezzecchi comes over the line. He's finding a 130.394. Some lap by Alex, of course. He spent the majority of it towing his brother Mark, but a 130.222 as we inch ever closer to Bagnaia's all-time lap record. Acosta's got himself up into 3rd place. That's a brilliant job by the Spaniard. We haven't seen Acosta qualify on the front row of the grid at any stage in 2025 so far this year. He's best qualifying 4th on the grid all the way back at round 3 in Austin. A 130.4 has got Acosta inside the top 3.
So Marc Marquez currently in 7th place, which would be a worst qualifying of 2025, although he certainly has a little bit more pace up his sleeve. Decided to pull in rather than complete that lap, which would have been faster than the last time he was on had he not bailed out of it, just approaching turn 14 as we follow Quartararo, who's continuing to push on and potentially pushing on to a place back on the front row of the grid here.
He's some watch, isn't he? All action. Quartararo now aggressive, hard on the front end of that Yamaha into turn 14. How good was he on the front end of the M1 last weekend in Barcelona to get that best ever sprint finish in second? Getting the bike looking nervous as he's aggressive on the flick left into the final corner. 8th at the moment on the standings is Quartararo. That's where he stays put for now. Yeah, it's almost a full calendar year since Acosta found himself starting a MotoGP race on the front row. That was, of course, in Motegi, where it went rather spectacularly wrong after his qualifying brilliance over in Japan, crashing out of victory contention in both the sprint and the Grand Prix. So that's the opening laps completed then here in Misano, and at the end of it, it's a 130.222 for a rider who's got so many P2s in 2025 at the moment. Alex Marquez well on course for back-to-back pole positions. 2 in the space of a week, beckoning here for 73.
Yeah, maybe changing his name from Mr. P2 to Mr. Q2 if he can keep this up and running. At the moment, it's Ducati, Aprilia, KTM on the front row of the grid. It's an all-Ducati second row with Morbidelli, Bagnaia and Di Giannantonio. Marquez, Quartararo and Marini on the third row. Marini, a little bit of surprise, not only to see him in 9th at the moment, but he's only found a 1:31.1 on his first lap. Marini was well into the 1:30s yesterday afternoon.
Yeah, Marino was saying yesterday he feared that qualifying was going to be one of the toughest sessions of his weekend. If there is still rather a glaring weakness for Honda, he still believes it is their performance in all that time attack on a soft rear tyre. He says you always see the bunch of Ducatis make big leaps forward, don't you, on Saturdays and onwards. So at the moment we've got the thumbs up from Aprilia management. Well, yesterday it was teamwork that made the dream work. It was the Bezzecchi and Martin tandem show which got both of them into this Q2 session, and to get both of them maybe on the front row. We'll still be hoping to get Martin inside the top 6.
This time it's Mark going out behind Alex, having gone out the other way on the
La tension est en train de monter très sérieusement ici à Misano. Francesco Bagnaia, il peut quand même pas ici chez lui laisser au moins la première ligne lui échapper. Même si ça va beaucoup mieux que les 2 Grands Prix précédents, ça doit quand même lui faire du bien. Et ben il va néanmoins se rater. Oh, Davide Tardozzi n'est pas content du tout parce que il y a beaucoup de tours qui ont été ratés.
So Alex is not providing any kind of toe or reference to Marc Marquez. He's of course currently on provisional pole. Mark looking to take it off him.
Do you know what? Mark is pushing big time. You can see that Rio is already spinning up underneath him going through turn 3. Great shot that from the overhead helicopter. Yeah, they are now starting to put Alex's 1:30.222 under some serious threat. Alex is not really hanging about himself, is he? Just out of your picture here as they exit turn 8. But at the moment it's Mark versus Acosta, you feel, in this battle, this current battle for pole.
It's in the 3rd sector where Alex pulled out some time over Mark on the previous lap. Of course, we know that Alex is so good in the fast right-handers versus Mark, and that's what this 3rd sector is full of. 11 is completed, now into 12, as Marc Marquez is laying it all on the line to try and deny his brother pole position.
Yes, Acosta behind him as well. He had a big shake going through Cavone. He's leaving it all on the line here. Acosta, I was going to say, Acosta was really messy, really scrappy going through the fast rights, and the pace ahead of him as he tries to hang on to Mark was just simply too hot to handle. So Acosta goes down while in 3rd place. How decisive could that be as far as he's concerned? Mark moves up from 7th to 2nd with a 1:30.352. That's his best time of the weekend so far. But it was clear, you could see how hard Acosta was pushing through the fast rights to run with Mark, and then just going through 14. Such an easy mistake to make, trail braking into that first gear 14, and unfortunately down he went.
Yeah, into turn 14. It's a slow crash, but a damaging one for Pedro Acosta. Front end folds through the 60km/h turn 14, and with it go hopes, I think, of a place on the front of the grid, although he has continued. But the pole position of Alex Marquez coming under some threat now from Bezzecchi on the Aprilia, who's up halfway round, and Gian Antonio also threatening a dart at the front row of the grid.
Well, it was his first MotoGP pole position in 50 Grand Prix last weekend in Barcelona. It's like London buses, isn't it? You wait an age for 1 to turn up and then 2 come along at the same time. What about Bagnaia? 6 up to 4th. And of course, he's still got 2.5 minutes of this session remaining. He runs in hot though once again into the 1st corner. Back to the Gian Antonio. Digia on the front row most recently in Hungary. He drops the rear ride height device on the 49 bike. Over the line he goes. Stays in P7 at 1:30.535. Something happened to Bezzecchi in sector 3 because Bez was flying in the first half of his last lap. But here comes Quartararo, Fabio Quartararo. Surely not. Having looked lost and all at sea on practice Friday here yesterday. He wasn't even sure whether he was going to qualify with the medium or the soft tyre. So lost was Quartararo yesterday. But once again, having come through Q1 with the fastest time. Surely this is not a 5th pole position of the season coming from Quartararo. You can't rule anything out, can you, when the factory Yamaha ride is about in qualifying?
If there's anyone can do it, Fabio Quartararo is your man. Morbidelli's onto the front row now in 3rd. He's found a 30.3. Bezzecchi super strong through the 1st sector, but he's going to have to try and manage that and try and get the 3rd sector right, as he didn't on the previous lap. Front row certainly possible, pole improbable, but this is Fabio Quartararo we're talking about. He goes into 2nd place.
But you know what, Marc Marquez might be getting bumped off the front row here, because Marco Bezzecchi, if he carries this lap on through, he is going to smash Alex Marquez out of pole position.
Alex is going quicker too.
Here comes Bez, the Gian Antonio we're looking at right now. Curious to see how Bez gets on this time around in the 3rd sector. He's lost time, but this is going to be close. This is going to be tight. The Gian Antonio looking to make progress from the middle of the 3rd row of the grid. Out of the final corner, he goes right now. And Didier does move up 1 row, then up to 6th place. All eyes, though, on Bez. 5th fastest at the moment, and he has taken it. Brilliant by Marco Bezzecchi. What a last sector. What a last lap by the home hero. A 130.134 has got him on pole right now. Alex Marquez has lost time in sector 3, so that could be it. Well, Quartararo once again is on a strong final lap. Bezzecchi, though, at the moment on course for a fairy tale pole here in Misano.
Did Jorge Martin provide that crucial little bit of slipstream on the way down to Cavone? It was 900ths of a second between the Aprilias. Martin paying back his teammate for the help yesterday.
Look at this, though, by Fabio Quartararo. He's just come through the 3rd sector. He's up by 0.03 of a second now, according to our timing screen monitors. Is there going to be the ultimate gate crashing of the Bezzecchi and Aprilia party here in Misano by Fabio Quartararo? Out of the final corner he goes on the factory Yamaha over the line. No. Quartararo takes the checker flag. It's still a phenomenal P3 for the Frenchman, having come once again out of Q1. He's a bit frustrated right now.
Himself, I think.
Oh, he still produced another brilliant performance. Bagnaia was as high as 4th, wasn't he, in the early part of this session. Pushed back down to 7th, and he cannot improve. So Bagnaia will head row 3. Marc Marquez once again finds himself starting in P4, just as he did at Silverstone, Assen, and at the Red Bull Ring in Austria. Well, that was awesome. That was spectacular, wasn't it, from Marco Bezzecchi? What a performance. A 130.134, just outside of the all-time lap record. He produces the big stand-up wheelie after taking pole position number 6 in MotoGP. Takes his career tally into double figures. That was his 10th pole for Bezzecchi.
Marini's just got
awesome.
6th, by the way, on the Honda. So we've now got Marini 6th, Bagnaia back down to 8th. So we've got Aprilia, Ducati, Yamaha front row, Ducati, Honda on your 2nd row. Bagnaia 8th. Acosta's price that he's paid for that crash is 9th place on the grid. Aldeguer 10th from Martin and Mir, who of course never took part in that session. Well, boy, did teamwork pay off for Aprilia this weekend. Bezzecchi towed Martin into Q2 yesterday, and Martin maybe provided that crucial slipstream for Bezzecchi to take pole today.
Let's go and get the thoughts then of, I'm sure, an ecstatic team boss, Massimo Rivola, who's with Jack.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant job by Marco. He helped Jorge yesterday. Jorge helped him today. Massimo, pole position in Misano. That's a special one.
Quite special. We always said that it is not our track, but clearly it's Marco's track. But it's good to see Aprilia going to this level. I'm super happy about the attitude of the two, because Jorge was humble enough to understand that Marco had the chance to do it and he didn't, and he delivered. So super team job. I'm super proud of my guys.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
2nd pole in the last 4 Grand Prix for Bezzecchi, rebounding quite superbly from a miserable weekend in Barcelona. I tell you what, the big loser in that session was Acosta. Pedro Acosta was 3rd and on the front row when he crashed out trying to go with Marc Marquez late on in that turn 14 drama. But Marco Bezzecchi, well, he's going to enjoy every single inch of this cool-down lap around this 4.226 kilometre Misano circuit, because that was some lap. One of the best qualifying laps of his life, without any question. As we just mentioned, there's been this happens too often, doesn't it? Acosta, we know, is so strong, but he makes key mistakes at key moments of the weekend. Casting minds back to Hungary just a couple of rounds ago. At that stage, he was third, as he mentioned, slips off and drops back down to 9th on the grid. Fabio Quartararo has delivered more brilliance for Yamaha through Q1 fastest, and once again back on the front row. How does he keep doing it? Jack's about to find out with the boss, Mike Marigali.
Yeah, it's a good question as Fabio rolls into Parc Ferme. Yesterday we asked him, Fabio, you managed to turn it around Friday to Saturday in Barcelona. Can you do it again tomorrow? And he said, no chance. We're lost. We're completely lost. So how on earth is he on the front row?
I just said that he's crazy like a horse. I don't know how he was able to turn it around. And this morning he was just more quiet. They really analyze all the information that we gathered yesterday. We also guide him in a way, but then he did it by himself. It's incredible. It's difficult.